Alabama currently, I love that song. I just got to say it. I say it every time. On the outside looking into the projected college football playoff bracket, Indiana tumbled after losing to Ohio State, but remains in, while SMU has found its way in thanks to some upset losses. Paging Paul Finebaum. There he is. Hey, Paul. How we doing?
What's up, Paul?
Let's dive right in, Paul. How many SEC teams do you believe should get into the CFP field?
Right now, Molly, it's hard to come up with a rationale for more than three. Even though it's an uneven system, it's unequitable. The SEC is still the best league. They play more difficult schedules, but you can't do what Alabama did Saturday and make a claim. You can't do what Ole Miss did. So even though the number probably should be higher, realistically, it's three right now.
Paul Finebaum, I must confess to you, sir, I'm very, very disappointed in your words. I'm very disappointed because let me tell you something right now. I mean, you should have said it. Listen, Alabama didn't lose to an SEC team. You're talking about Alabama, Ole Miss, and I think, well, who was it? It was Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. They lost to unranked teams. That wasn't teams in the SEC. I mean, so what does that say about the SEC? Is it time, Paul Finebaum, dare I say, for us to stop calling the SEC the best conference in football? In college football. Is it time? I think it's a fair question.
It is a fair question. Top to bottom, 1 to 16, it is the best league in college football, but their top teams are flawed. And Stephen A., the problem in the SEC is that it is balanced. You go on the road, even to an unranked team. We saw it happen, Ole Miss, Florida. We saw Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Auburn, three unranked teams beat ranked teams. It's different than what we see in the Big Ten. The Big Ten has the best two teams in the country. There's no arguing there. But what happens after that is different. When Penn State has to struggle at a Minnesota, schools like Illinois are in the top 25 that wouldn't be in the upper division in the SEC. And Indiana skates with a one-game schedule. That's all they had to play. And in that one game, they were terrible.
You got wrong.
Listen, this is going to come down to, and I disagree with both of you, they should take a three-loss team. Because this is going to come down to taking a second team out of the ACC or a fourth team out of the SEC. Do they take the SMU Miami loser or Clemson ahead of, say, and I agree with Paul about Alabama, over Ole Miss, over, let's say Texas A&M, because let's be honest, SMU's not that good. Miami almost lost to Cal, got buried at Georgia Tech.
Doesn't Dabo deserve consideration at Clemson?
Well, hold on now. Dabo lost to Georgia 31-7. I don't want to hear from him either.
Very early.
I don't care what early it is. He lost 31-7. At Auburn, it's a hard game to win. I watched every play of that game. Auburn treated that game on Saturday night like the Crucible. Saved Freeze's job. The place went nuts. Oklahoma, Norman. All right, they stink, but Norman, Oklahoma, that's bigger than Wake Forest. That's bigger than Syracuse, New York for the ACC. And obviously, Florida's played very well lately. Almost beat Georgia, beat LSU. Listen, a road game in the SEC is 50 times harder than any road game in that Big Ten. How about winning at Rutgers? Is that a big deal? How about at UCLA in front of 30,000? Is that a big deal? How about at Maryland? Is that a big deal? You mentioned Minnesota. I'll throw Northwestern and Purdue in. That conference stinks. They're going to get that fourth team in because of Petiti is going to carry the Big Ten. If the SEC, which, let's be honest, Paul, take Ole Miss and take SMU. Let's put Ole Miss and SMU in a neutral field. Who's going to win the game? Ole Miss is winning the game.
By the way, I just got the text from Burke Magnus. I've been replaced as the voice of the SEC by Doggy. Doggy, you do a great job.
Funny.
And in many ways, you're right. But it's an inequitable system. The only listen, I think what you're suggesting, Doggy, is really that the SEC and the Big Ten say, we don't really need the rest of you guys. We can have our own tournament, and it would be good because that's really where the cream is. But some of these outliers, I'll go back to what you said a minute ago, Stephen A. If Clemson wins Saturday against a very good South Carolina team, I think they ought to be in. I agree with you on that.
That's how I was thinking. That's what I was. I certainly wasn't saying right now when you got a loss to Georgia and a loss to Louisville on your schedule this year. I understand that part, but if they go and they beat South Carolina, I definitely think that you got 2 losses on the season. And Doggy, it's not just the fact that they would only have 2 losses. Is when you talk about Alabama at 3 losses, how in the hell do you score 3 points against Oklahoma? I mean, when you mention the word Oklahoma and football in the same sentence, it automatically equates to 20 points for the opposition throughout history. They never play any defense, okay? But suddenly, they hold Alabama to 3 points. Oh, so, Doggy, Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, that shouldn't count against them? Are you kidding? Vanderbilt?
There's other teams,
really? That's
Steve.
what we doing?
There's other teams. How about Ole Miss? Put Ole Miss in here. Ole Miss beat Georgia. They beat Georgia. And I'll tell you something else. One other thing. Let me ask you a question. Now, both of you.
That's fair.
Paulie, for you. All right. If Georgia loses to Texas or Texas A&M, that's their 3rd loss. You mean to tell me you're not putting Georgia in the Final 12? Let me get this straight. Georgia, who pound for pound is the best team. We're not going to put them in the Final 12.
Let Paul respond.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, Ole Miss has no business. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and Florida, 2 unranked teams, just like Alabama. Listen, neither one really belong in. I agree with you. Alabama, forget it. I mean, you may sneak in, but you don't really belong in. But ultimately, you're right about that. And Stephen A., I think the Clemson argument's fair. Doggy, Georgia is the only team in the SEC I think has a legitimate shot, because if they get to the SEC championship game and lose to Texas, I think you really shouldn't get knocked out because you earned a ticket into the SEC game with a 12-team playoff. Now, they got knocked out last year being undefeated, but that was a different year.
Yeah. All right. Paul, thank you so much for being with us. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and thankful that you put up with us on this show.
You too. Happy Thanksgiving.